Good afternoon. I hope everybody had a great weekend. We're here to talk the tropics once again with a new tropical storm in the Atlantic. This one is Lorenzo. Just like 6 years ago, forming in a similar place later on in the season off the African coast. This is not going to be a threat to land, but we are going to talk about it as it still has a possibility of becoming our next hurricane. And there will be another wave leaving Africa shortly that does show some potential signs of causing some mischief down the road, as it may be moving into the Caribbean by the end of the weekend, and something to monitor for next week. Anything that gets into the Caribbean this time of the year, we've got to watch because water temperatures are climatologically quite high. So we are going to be talking about that here in this video, especially the second half of the video. I do want to talk about what's going on in the U.S. and with our coastal storm or pair of coastal storms that have been bringing rough weather here to the East Coast. So we're going to start with that here, and I'll share my screen and walk you through the current satellite image of the United States, and not just the East Coast getting hit, but the West Coast as well. I don't want to ignore you folks. So on the East Coast, we've got two areas of low pressure, one here and one here. These haven't quite consolidated into a major storm, but nonetheless, we have a lot of wind and a lot of surf still impacting areas of the Northeast, and still some rough weather across portions of the coastal Carolinas. But this one heading out to sea, this one's going to take a little bit longer before it can leave. Our next system affecting California with some heavy rain, that is going to drop down and bring some heavy rain into the central and southern portions of California. And that is already bringing some rough weather into NorCal and into Southwest Oregon. Why is that substantial? Well, as it moves eastward and crosses the Rockies and heads into the plains, we are likely going to see some active weather and our first widespread regional outbreak of severe weather by the time we get into the weekend. So we will be chatting about that as well here in the video. And I will show you that right now, the outlook right now for the day on, I believe it's Saturday. Saturday and Saturday night. We are already looking at a preview of what could be our first outbreak of severe weather, including some tornadoes across the Mid-South. That includes northeastern Texas, Arkansas, eastern Oklahoma, right through the Delta region up into central Illinois, central Missouri, southwest Indiana, western Kentucky, western Tennessee. And a little early to get too specific on this one, just a heads up at this point. But I do think the setup could favor a few tornadoes at this point, certainly damaging wind and some hail as well. In the tropics, we are going to shift our focus to Lorenzo for the first portion of the video. Not anything to be super concerned with at this point, just another name. But it is going to get our ACE value, which is the total amount of cyclonic energy, accumulated cyclonic energy, over the 100 mark. So we are slightly above average now. We've caught up with the last few storms, Jerry and Karen. But this system, no threat to land. It's actually moving northwest and expected to continue to curve over the coming days. Winds are up to about 50 miles per hour. It has a possibility of approaching hurricane strength. We'll talk about that here a little bit more. But first, I do want to show you what else we're monitoring. The remains of Jerry, which did not survive the threat of the wind shear that impacted it north of the islands, fortunately. It's still out there. We'll talk about that in a little bit, but it will be interacting with Lorenzo. And then our next wave, which has left the African coast, is going to move across at a fairly low latitude, around 10 north, and will be approaching the islands later on this weekend. And right now it's aimed at the Windward Islands, but there can be adjustments to this forecast. We don't quite know yet until the system begins to form, and some uncertainty on that. It could develop sooner, which would mean maybe it tries to take a more northerly track. It could stay weaker and head a little bit lower. It could try to pull something like Beryl, where it does develop and moves across the Windward Islands. Hopefully not at that intensity at this point, and then enters the Caribbean, where it could be a bigger threat as we get into next week. So we are going to talk about that one here, but really at this point, it's just the remains of Jerry and Lorenzo, and then the next system, which I expect will be Melissa if it develops, and that will probably happen sometime towards the weekend or early next week. Here is a look at the tropics so you all can get an idea of what's going on. We're going to blow this up a little bit so you can get a better view from some of your mobile devices. And this is Lorenzo here at about 40 west, already beginning to move northwest, expected to curve around. There is a trough that is tugging it northeast. You see that trough dipping down here. That is pulling it away from any sort of land threat at this point. That is also pulling the remains of Jerry away. We have had a lot of wind shear across this portion of the basin. After we got rid of Imelda here a couple weeks ago, that wind shear has been hostile to storms. So Jerry never really got to his full potential, and things are fairly quiet between Jerry and the islands for the time being. Now, the next wave has left the African coast near Liberia, and it is very low, down below 8 degrees north, which is not typically a spot where we see tropical development. It's a little too far south for that to happen. It will have to wait for our storm Lorenzo to pull away before it even stands a chance. And when that happens, we're probably looking at the second half of the week. So this could be our next yellow area, I think maybe as soon as tomorrow, which will be looked at for possible development from the National Hurricane Center. I don't know exactly how they'll handle it. That is not something I'm privy to, but something I'll be watching for you, as you might imagine. Also, we do have a frontal boundary stretching from our non-tropical low, or lows, if you want to call it, two of them here. And that extends down through the Bahamas and Cuba into the Western Caribbean and serves as a focus of some fairly heavy rainfall over the Western Caribbean. That's something we always have to watch at this time of year, but right now wind shear remains a little bit too high for anything to get its act together at this point. Here's a closer look, and you see low pressure spinning and moving away from North Carolina and South Carolina. This sucker brought close to a foot of rain over portions of Georgetown County in South Carolina. We had a lot of rain around Charleston up to Myrtle Beach and in just inland areas. Quite a bit of rain in North Carolina, but worse to our south of North Carolina. Now, we did have wind gust issues. We did have coastal flooding in the usual places on the Outer Banks and tidal flooding in Charleston and those areas as well. But the worst is over at this point. Now, not yet the case for the Northeast. You'll see there's still a fetch of moisture coming on shore at this point. We still have wind gusts that are fairly strong, in particular across Long Island and the southern portion of New England, even coastal Connecticut, with this southeasterly and southerly wind fetch at the mid levels. At this point, I don't think it's going to get any worse than where it is now, but we will continue to see patches of rain moving inland and strong wave action with that as well. But not a tropical feature, not going to get named. We don't need to put out a track or anything like that on it. Just a substantial storm that is pulling a lot of moisture onshore and interacting with a big area of high pressure to its north, which has created some strong winds with it. And if you take a look at the viz, you can actually see visible satellite. I call it the viz. That's the weather biz word here. I'm going to stop it, and you'll see the two circulation centers here. And we actually have had some clearing in both, indicating a little bit of an eye with this feature to the southeast of Cape Fear, which is right here. And we have a feature right here, which is to the east of Rehoboth Beach, southeast of Atlantic City, southeast of Barnegat. And these are kind of pinwheeling around each other. This system kind of moving out in this direction, this system rotating back, and will eventually dissipate over Delaware and eastern Maryland. This one was the stronger of the two. It got down to about 995 millibars, which would be about the equivalent of a tropical storm. It produced wind gusts on the coast of the Carolinas in the 50 to 60 mile per hour range. So certainly a gale force storm. This one actually produced some stronger winds. We had gusts as high as 70 to 74 miles per hour just offshore around Barnegat Light. A lot of that has to do with the fact that there's a massive area of high pressure here. And with the lowering pressure, the gradient was just very high in this area. A lot of fetch from the east. And that's not uncommon to see with nor'easters. But fortunately, these two did not combine into a mega low somewhere in here and cause extreme amounts of damage. It's certainly a substantial storm, but not one that was extreme, at least in my book. So that's what we're talking about. Looking at the Western Caribbean, lots of rain around Jamaica, Eastern Cuba, Western Haiti, and tracking up through the southeastern and central Bahamas. But fortunately, no development expected. The Gulf is very quiet. Florida's getting a nice break from the humidity we've had going back to April. It will eventually moisten back up, but we'll enjoy the break while we can. Western Gulf region is quiet for the time being. Here's a look at the central Atlantic. You see the remains of Jerry, kind of tough to pick out, but there is a bit of a center in here. It's just not really closed off all that thunderstorm activity well to the east. I don't think Jerry's going to try to regenerate into a tropical system. I'd give it maybe a 3% chance of that happening, but all of this is going to move east. It's going to try to join forces here with Lorenzo. So Jerry and Lorenzo are going to get together here, have a bit of a backyard brawl, but Lorenzo's the system that looks healthier at the moment. It has a circulation with it. It does have some wind shear. You can see these high clouds coming out of it in different directions. That is indicative of wind shear, but a big enough system here where we do have the possibility of it to strengthen a little bit more. And in between, A couple of weak little waves to watch moving through the Windward Islands, certainly getting a lot of rain on Trinidad today. And we have another wave that will be moving in a couple of days from the east, but nothing expected to develop at this time. Here's a closer look at Lorenzo, and you see it's getting dark out there in the central and eastern Atlantic. An exposed system here, but it looks about as healthy as Jerry did a few days ago. It's not going to be in as high a shear environment at this time. And you can see a healthy system, but not one to be threatening any kind of land. And the interesting part about this system, it is getting pulled away by a trough, and then that trough will catch and release it. It's going to get stuck in about 4 or 5 days towards the end of the week, where the steering currents will fall apart and whatever's left of the system may try to make a loop back. I do think it'll be a lot weaker at that point, but it may stick around into next week after the wave to its south passes by. So it'll be behind what I think will end up being Melissa. And if you look at the intensity forecast, nothing really jumps out at this being a stronger system. We do have some of our hurricane models trying to make this a hurricane. We'll give it about a 5 to 10% chance of that happening. The official forecast is just below hurricane strength at this point, around 90 miles per hour. We are looking at the Northeast again because I don't really have much to say about Lorenzo that's really going to impact anybody who's watching today. And you can see the system east of the Carolinas kind of falling apart, then catching a second wind, then the system off the East Coast kind of falling apart. We have a major low pressure system that will actually take over north of Bermuda and end up kind of absorbing both of these. I think the main story right now is that we continue to have wet weather into tonight across eastern New England, but it does dry out across the mid-Atlantic region. Winds are going to still be up for the afternoon and nighttime hours, but should gradually weaken some tomorrow, except right along the coast. And by the time we get to Wednesday, the weather should be much quieter at this point. We do see a bit of a wave of disturbed weather moving through Atlantic Canada on Thursday, and there could be a little bit of snow in the higher ground of the Gaspé Peninsula. It is that time of the year. Here's a look at rain totals over the next 24 hours. We could see another inch or so across southeastern Mass, including the islands, maybe about half an inch over Rhode Island and Boston. A lot less when we get into New Hampshire and western and central Mass and Connecticut. Most of your rain is finished. There's a possibility of seeing maybe some locally heavy rain as well here in central Jersey, just up from Atlantic City, maybe up towards Lakewood and to the east of Fort Dix and Mount Holly in those areas. But overall, this system could have been a lot worse. Unfortunately, it has not been. We will see things quieting down as we move into Tuesday night and Wednesday. Just a little bit of very light rain left over in the areas that stick out into the Atlantic. Here's a look at wind speeds over the next 24 hours or so. We're still going to have some gusts over 50 miles per hour affecting the Cape and the islands, 40 to 45 mile per hour gusts, both on Long Island, on the central Jersey shore, and on the south coast of Connecticut. And, we could have isolated power outages even in inland areas of southern New York, New Jersey, maybe Delaware, Connecticut. Just a lot of that from the rain weakening the tree limbs and the wind on top of that. I saw that in Raleigh a couple of times yesterday morning. It wasn't particularly windy, but we had enough rain, maybe about an inch of rain, some gusts of 35, 40 miles an hour. Just the two together were enough to take some limbs down and affect some of the power and cause some interruptions. Nothing major, but just something to keep in mind. If you're in this area and you haven't experienced it yet, you certainly still could. Here's a look at the winds off the Carolina coast, Virginia, and the worst is done at this point. We will see just a bit of a breeze tonight. The opening of Chesapeake Bay could still be kind of windy overnight tonight into tomorrow morning, but things should start to subside as we head into the day on Tuesday. Now let's shift focus and take a look at the next wave. And right now, nothing super concerning. Nothing's going to happen quickly. In fact, because we have wind shear in place, that is quite unhealthy, and it is doing its best to try to kill Lorenzo, but Lorenzo's hanging in there. You see that wind shear. This wave all the way down in here is just not in an ideal spot to develop. Now, if it survives, and a lot of our model guidance indicates that it will, when it gets out into this area, if it's far enough to the south, I do think it will have a possibility of developing. It should be in a more favorable spot for that to happen. If we take a look, I blew this up. Now we're going to make it a little bit smaller. If we take a look here at the upper level pattern, I'm going to show you why I'm a little bit more concerned about this one here. So you see our trough over the northeastern Atlantic digging down. That picks up Lorenzo. It is going to lift out here on Thursday, and we are going to see high pressure rebuilding over the eastern Atlantic. Now, this high is going to be a little bit farther south than where it is right now. And as it does that, it would force a wave farther to the west. And because our wave is so far south, it's not going over the Cabo Verdes. It's going to go a few hundred miles south of there. It has a window to where it actually will avoid that strong wind shear. The wind shear is going to be up in here because of the area of high pressure and the fact that our wave is down in here. It should come underneath it and avoid that hostility. Now, is it going to develop quickly? I would say probably not. But if it does make its way into the Caribbean, it should be in a more favorable spot somewhere in here, assuming that's where it ends up to develop. Now, once it gets to the Caribbean, it's going to have an impact somewhere. And that is what we're going to be figuring out here in the coming 7, 8, 9 days. You can see the GFS model has been pretty aggressive, although not as aggressive as previous runs in developing a system to the south of Hispaniola, to the north of Colombia in about 9 days, which is a ways off in the weather world. You have a big area of high pressure building over Florida. We've got troughs that try to pull this away, but this would probably have a system that gets kind of stuck and waits on the next trough to pull it away. So we got a lot of time to watch it. This is from Michael Lowry again, who's a meteorologist. This shows the wind shear across the Caribbean Sea. And, as warm as the waters have been, the wind shear has been on the high side, at least in June and July. It wasn't last year with Hurricane Beryl, but it was this year. In August, it was still a little bit high. But if we had a chance of something forming in September or even October, it would have certainly been favorable. The problem is we just didn't have the rising air to come in place. So right now we're going to start to see some rising air, it looks like, when we get to the middle and second portion of October. And because our wind shear is actually down towards the lowest values you would expect this time of the year, you see how we're way down at the bottom of the graph. That is at least an item we need to be a little bit more concerned with. Looking at the wind shear, which I've talked about, you see the belt of strong westerlies in place here. I'll draw over it so you can see here. Big trough in here, strong westerlies in here at about 10 north. Well, our wave is at 8 north, so it's going to try to come underneath all this wind shear. And our system, Lorenzo, is going to be all the way up into here. So it's going to be escaping most of the wind shear. And this next wave is going to also escape it. There's going to be kind of a squeeze play going on here. And when we get into next week, you see the wind shear in the Eastern Caribbean isn't exactly going to be favorable for this system, but it is going to lessen as this system makes its way into the Central and eventually Western Caribbean if it does it. If it tries to develop in here, it'll get killed by the wind shear. So I don't think we have a hurricane coming up to the north of the islands like we saw with Aaron and some of the others. I just don't think it stands a chance with this kind of westerly wind shear. If it comes farther south, it does have to worry about South America. If it finds a way to slide in between in this area where the colors are maybe light green or lighter blue, then it will be in an ideal and optimal spot to develop into a system. Water temperatures have been very warm down here. The bath water is warm. We just need something to actually jump into it to take advantage of it. But you see that. In fact, we're looking at 30 to 32 degrees Celsius for most of the Caribbean. That is 86 to 90 Fahrenheit. With the warmest waters in the basin near the Cayman Islands, north of Jamaica, south of Cuba, but certainly warm enough down here to support a stronger system if we get to that point. So what do the models do with this? Well, here's a look at the European ensembles from earlier. I don't have the latest. You see Lorenzo curving away. You see very weak low pressure, not a strong storm signal here in the Western Caribbean. So I'm not really worried about that. Here comes our next wave. It's probably not really developing at this point. But there are a couple of ensemble members that do show that possibility by Friday or Saturday. When we get into the weekend, though, we definitely have a bit of a stronger signal of something to try to develop. And you can see the majority of these ensembles do take this system through the Windward Islands. We have a couple that are maybe as far north as Dominica or even Guadeloupe. But generally speaking, we're talking the southern half of the Caribbean chain. After that, things are going to be a lot more uncertain, as you might imagine. Does the system try to get pulled northward towards Hispaniola or Puerto Rico? Does it stay west? Does it even interact with South America? Again, we got a lot of time for that to be figured out. So that was a European. That's a physics model. This is an AI model, the Google DeepMind. And the one thing you're going to see here is that the Google DeepMind does not develop our system at all before next week. Doesn't mean it's not out there. It just says it will not develop. Now you can see next week, in about a week from today, Monday or Tuesday, we start to see development chances growing as the system moves north of the ABC Islands or over the ABC Islands and north of Venezuela. and then into the South Central Caribbean, which is an unusual spot to see a system develop. But I'm going to give you a couple of examples of where that's actually happened before and some names you will recognize. So as the system continues towards the end of next week, it does have a possibility of maybe being a hurricane, or at the very least a tropical storm. And you see there's 25 different ensembles, and about 15 of them have something, and some of them have some pretty strong solutions here. So Central America, Jamaica, Cuba, Hispaniola, even Puerto Rico should probably be just keeping an eye on this for the time being. But as always, there's a lot of time and things can certainly still change. Here's the European AI. So I'll show you the other AI model, and it shows some possibilities, but again, coming very far south. And this would be around the 21st. So we're talking next Tuesday, 9 days from now, or 8 days from now. And then we start to see more and more models showing some development in the Southwestern Caribbean, and a couple of one-offs that threaten the Mona Passage, Hispaniola, and Puerto Rico at that point. But at this point, there is a signal there. There will be very warm water. There'll be minimal wind shear. And the one thing that's unique about this one is that it is actually going far enough south to avoid the strong wind shear, but not far enough south to avoid South America, if correct, which is, again, not too super uncommon for this time of the year. So the European says we may start to have impacts in the Windward Islands on Sunday evening and continuing into Monday. Beyond that, it takes the track towards the south of Jamaica and eventually towards Honduras and Belize and Yucatan. It does not pull it northward into the Greater Antilles at this point. That is one option. Here's the GFS, which has continued to show a threat to the Northern Caribbean. It is now trending farther south and has more of a threat to Jamaica and the Cayman Islands and Cuba. And something to watch, unfortunately, if Cuba's in play, so would be the Bahamas and probably Florida as well. But this will probably change a million times. If you take a look at a comparison of the models, you see very few of them show development in the shorter term, with the exception of the Canadian, which is already developing this system by the end of Thursday or early on Friday. Now, if we move this along towards Saturday, you're going to see the European does not develop it yet. The Canadian has a stronger tropical storm. The GFS and the Icon all show a wave, but one that is not yet formed into a tropical system or a cyclone. And then moving this along here towards the end of the weekend, again, we've got the Canadian, which has a hurricane. And so it's already gaining latitude. The Euro, the GFS, and the Icon just have a wave that would be approaching the islands. This would be Saturday night. Taking a look a little bit farther along here. Let me get you a different timestamp here. You'll see the GFS pulls us through the islands late Sunday night, early Monday morning. It has it going over the St. Vincent and the Grenadines, possibly even over Tobago. This would be the loop around from Lorenzo, by the way, maybe making a second visit. I don't know. European starting to form something in the Southeastern Caribbean. The Canadian, again, was, I think, too aggressive forming this thing. I just don't think that's going to be right, but we'll have to see. And then the Icon moving into the Southeastern Caribbean. So at this point, 3 of the 4 of our major models have this in the Southeastern Caribbean, but haven't really developed it just yet. Moving further along, and now the uncertainty is going to grow. The GFS does have a developing depression or storm. So does the European, although it's a little bit tougher to see. The Icon does as well. And of course, the Canadian is still just, it's, I don't know, but it's taken this thing right into the line of fire with that wind shear. I just don't see it being right. I mean, maybe it is, but I just don't see it happening. And then moving this along further, the Canadian doesn't go out. I guess it does go out that far. Canadian avoids the islands. The European and the GFS have a tropical storm southeast of Jamaica, which I think would probably be the more likely scenario at this time. And here's why. We have seen this happen multiple times before. It's not a completely unheard of track. Hurricane Matthew did this exact track where it was a wave that came off of Africa at the very end of September, moved into the Caribbean, became a hurricane just to the north of Colombia. Pulling up the map here, actually became a Category 5 just north of Colombia, not in a place you would expect it, and then cut up. And this one, unfortunately, ended up affecting the Bahamas and the southeastern coast. That was back in 2016. Hurricane Sandy. This actually came from a wave off of the African coast right around this time of the year, October 11th. It did not develop, though, until it made it into the southwestern Caribbean. So it spent a week and a half traversing that 10-degree north latitude, then finally developed, got into an area where it got pulled northward, came up through Cuba. And I'm not saying this is going to be another Sandy. I'm just saying the analog is certainly something we're going to be watching. Hurricane Mitch is another one. It started as a tropical wave, which left the African coast on October 8th and moved westward and then eventually developed when it got just to the northwest of Colombia. And this one, unfortunate for those in Central America, was their deadliest storm on record. It could have turned northward and hit and gone into the Gulf. Instead, it spent a lot of time over Central America. Eventually, it found its way and actually came across Florida as a tropical storm, but at that point, a lot weaker. And then I don't know how reliable this data is because it's from 1954, but Hurricane Hazel, also a tropical wave, which left Africa on October 5th. Actually, it probably left, honestly, it probably left at the end of September, but made it to the islands on October 5th and developed into a hurricane just to the north of Colombia. So I know people out there are saying a track like this that kind of hugs north of South America is unheard of this time of the year. It actually isn't. It's a track that is more common than you think. And if the GFS is on to something, and even the European is starting to hint at something, and some of the ensembles are on something, at the very least, we can't just discount that possibility. So we'll leave it there. We're going to talk about it more here in the coming days. In the Western Pacific, we do have Nakri, which has now weakened. It was a typhoon south of Japan. It'll be a powerful system moving through the Northern Pacific. We've got a system to watch here off of the coast of Mexico, which could be our next tropical storm, probably riding the coast of Mexico. And then we do have a system I am watching closely southwest of Guam. It doesn't look like anything at this point to be concerned with. If you look at it today, but down the road, models indicate after it leaves Guam and heads westward, it could develop quickly into a typhoon and be an issue for the Philippines and maybe Taiwan and perhaps even the South China Sea area. And looking even at the Google DeepMind, you can see this could develop as soon as Wednesday or Thursday. And there's a split, but the majority of the model guidance takes us over the northern Philippines and then eventually towards either China or Vietnam. There are some that split and bring it up towards Taiwan, and some outliers that try to recurve it to the east of Taiwan. But this could be our next strong typhoon, and I would venture to guess possibility of even a super typhoon, depending on how it plays out. If you look at the Canadian model, it does very quickly intensify this system here on Friday and Saturday and continues to intensify it, pulling it towards South China. That's a Canadian model. Here's the GFS model, which, as you would imagine, would be very aggressive. It typically is, but it pulls it here very close to the Batanes and Cayugan province of the Philippines as a very powerful 934 millibar typhoon. That'd be about 150 mile per hour storm. It's been more of a threat to Taiwan, but it has been shifting south. I suspect it'll trend in the direction of the Philippines as well and eventually head towards Vietnam. And then finally, it's going to show you the European model. Does have a threat as well in the same area, as you can see, right over between the Philippines and Taiwan. But I wanted to bring up the Euro to show you that all these typhoons do matter, because as they recurve, you start to see stronger storm after stronger storm affecting Alaska and the Pacific Northwest. And we've been seeing some intense weather hitting this portion of the Northern Pacific. And as these storms move in like this, we are going to see a lot of wave action across Alaska. We are going to see more colder air down from Canada across the U.S., and we're likely going to be getting in on more severe weather in the coming weeks, especially in the plains and in portions of the South and maybe even the Great Lakes as well. So I appreciate everybody's time today. Thank you all for listening to me here for this half hour, and I'll be back on tomorrow. As always, I want to give all the honor and glory to my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. I thank him for everything I do, and I hope that's not something that you would take lightly, because as a Christian, I believe more and more every day I need to yield to God. John 3:30, he must become greater, I must become less. This doesn't mean that I feel I should be worthless. It just means that we all need to make God a bigger and bigger priority and make ourselves less and less the person that has to do everything. God gives us all each unique gifts. He gives us the ability to shine. But at the end of the day, all the glory and honor goes back to him because of the sacrifice made through Jesus Christ. Salvation is there, and I hope you understand that you have the opportunity to not only accept Jesus as your Savior, but open up that that pathway to heaven when your time here on earth is gone. It's a wonderful opportunity, and it's not something you have to work hard at earning. It is something, though, that you have to turn to God and repent to be able to have a gift to even have that opportunity. It's a door. It's a doorway into a future that is certain, but it is the opening up of a much more challenging life, and one that actually humbles you. I know it's humbled me in my 13 years of being a Christian. Being humbled is something that is nothing new to somebody like me who studies science and studies the earth and all these processes that abide by God's laws. But at the end of the day, it is a humbling experience, but one that I'm excited to share with you every day. So I hope everyone has a great Monday, and I'll be back here soon. God bless you.